Welcome to the City of Tempe Virtual Community Forum to provide information on the upcoming 2020 special bond election. But first, why don't we start out with the introduction. Tonight you will have two presenters. First, I'll introduce myself. My name is Mark Day, City of Tempe Municipal Budget Director, and I'll let the other presenter introduce himself.
Hi everybody, my name is Ken Jones. I'm a Deputy City Manager, Chief Financial Officer for the City of Tempe. And as Mark said, we're happy to welcome you here today so that you can get more information about the city's process for issuing bonds. If after tonight you have any other questions, feel free to contact us at any time. We'll give you some contact information at the end of the presentation. Welcome everybody.
Okay, this is a live event. We're going to have a brief presentation, so we have about 10 to 12 slides. And then at the end of the presentation, we will take time to answer your questions. On your screen at home, you'll see a question icon. If you click on this icon, you'll be able to type your question and then submit it to us. And then, like I said, at the end, we'll make sure we take time to answer all your questions. Note that all the viewer microphones are muted. We'll be recording this forum and the presentation will be posted at tempe.gov/budget. And just a little disclaimer here, the city and its employees are governed by Arizona law prohibiting the use of city resources to influence an election. Nothing in these materials are or should be construed in any way as an attempt to influence the results of any election. These materials are being provided solely for informational purposes. The city has called a special bond election to ask the residents to provide the city with the authorization to issue bonds to fund large capital projects that are part of a well-defined capital improvement program. Tempe residents will have the opportunity to vote on 5 separate initiatives that provide authorization to issue bonds in the categories and amounts shown on the slide. The total bond authorization being requested is $349 million. Let's take a few minutes to review each of the 5 major bond authorization categories and the types of projects that would be funded. The first category is water and sewer improvements with a requested authorization of $134 million. This bonding authorization will fund projects to maintain and improve treatment processes and capacity at the city's water and wastewater treatment plants, water distribution and storage infrastructure, security, billing systems, and facilities. The next category is streets and storm drains. This $74 million requested bond authorization will fund projects to construct or improve highways, streets, bike paths, bridges, city parking lots, alleys, traffic control systems, facilities, street lightings, street signage, acquiring right-of-way for transportation purposes, and improve the city's storm drain system. The third category is public safety, hardware, software, equipment, and facilities. This authorization will allow the city to acquire and improve the public safety radio system, hardware and software replacements, and schedule replacement of public safety vehicles and equipment. Also planned are improvements to an acquisition of public safety facilities. The fourth category is parks, recreation, and community services. The $45 million bond authorization will allow the city to acquire, construct, and improve park and recreational infrastructure, equipment, and facilities, including lighting, lakes, landscaping, and aquatics. The fifth category is municipal infrastructure preservation. This bond authorization will fund the acquisition, improvement, preventive maintenance, repairs, and rehabilitation of city buildings, infrastructure, landscape, and facilities. Projects in this category include the replacement of inefficient heating and AC systems, repair and replacement of flooring and roofs, improvements in the city's technology infrastructure, and hardware, software systems. It's important to note that the requested bond authorization in each category were derived from the individual capital projects that comprise the city's comprehensive 5-year capital improvement program. The current 5-year CIP program covers the period fiscal year 2021, which started July 1 of 20, through fiscal year 24-25. At the end of the presentation, we'll provide you with the website address where you can find detailed descriptions for each of the projects in the current 5-year CIP that would be funded with the requested bond authorization. What are City of Tempe bonds used for? Bond proceeds are used by the city to maintain public assets and infrastructure. As you drive around the city, you'll probably notice a number of large capital projects that have been funded with bond proceeds, such things as intersection improvements, street repaving, playgrounds and swimming pools, fire apparatus, water line replacement, water treatment facilities, and maintaining city buildings and facilities. You may ask how we determine which capital projects are included in the 5-year CIP. The city maintains a comprehensive asset management system where we use data to analyze asset life cycle condition to determine those assets that need to be maintained or replaced. Bond funding allows us to perform both deferred and preventive maintenance of our existing assets so that we are maintaining assets to industry standards. In addition, where the city has identified a need for system expansion, for example, the need for a new fire station due to growth in population and structures in a particular section of the city, bond proceeds enable us to add facilities.
So as Mark has outlined some of the uses for our bonds, this chart shows how these bonds and the capital projects themselves are based on the priorities established by the City Council. You can see that on the left vertical axis, we have health and safety versus just effectiveness and efficiency. And the majority of the bonds will be used for projects that accelerate health and safety. And you can see on the horizontal axis, on the bottom axis, that we are focusing more on asset preservation than system expansion. The bubbles represent projects combined that have the same scoring based on those criteria that I just mentioned. So you can see that many of the green projects that are being proposed for funding focus in the top right quadrant, which is preserving existing assets and focusing on the health and safety of the taxpayers. Next slide, Mark. So let's talk a little bit about the bond election cycles for the City of Tempe. The city has a 5-year capital improvement program, CIP, that the City Council approves every year. The first year of the CIP is an actual capital budget that will be spent in the following year. The following 4 years of the CIP represent planning for capital projects. So we have 5 years worth of capital projects that focus on, as I said on the last slide, preserving our existing assets and maintaining the health and safety of the community. The debt that is authorized for bond elections occurs every 4 years based on the election cycle mandated by the state. So although we have a 5-year capital program, we go out and get authorization every 4 years, which would imply that we would have bond authorization left at the end of the 4 years, which we do. The city asks the voters to approve the authorization of tax-exempt bonds to fund those projects in our capital program. And then those bonds are repaid with secondary property taxes that are levied against our taxpayers' properties every year. So that's just a brief understanding of how the city's bond cycle works. We'll go to the next slide, please. So a very logical question might be, why don't you just use the secondary property taxes to cash fund those projects? Mark, next slide. There are several reasons why we can't do that. The state of Arizona legislature years ago determined that secondary property taxes could only be used for one purpose, and that is to repay voter authorized debt to fund capital projects. We can't cash fund those capital projects with the secondary property tax, and we can't issue bonds without getting voter authorization when we repay those bonds with secondary property tax. So the cities are authorized to issue tax-exempt bonds, which further promotes the use of debt for these projects, because that's a very low interest loan to the city when you can issue tax-exempt bonds. The city of Tempe has AAA rated bonds, the highest rating you can get, which allows us to issue debt at a very low interest rate. The other thing that I believe the legislature was thinking when they implemented this system was, if you cash fund projects, large projects, you would end up saving money for several years, and the people paying the taxes might never see the benefit of the project. Because if you cash fund it and you set the money aside, like I said, you might never see the benefit of the project. Whereas if you're issuing low interest bonds, you immediately build the project, and the people who see the benefit of the project are repaying those bonds with their taxes as they're utilizing the assets that were put into place. Next slide. So what's very important in municipal bond issuances in the state of Arizona is, how do the taxpayers or the voters control their own destiny? Next slide. So there are statutory debt limits that the cities can only have so much outstanding debt, and it's based on the value of property within the city. During the recession that began in 2008, a lot of cities found themselves up against their debt limits because property values in the state dropped. So that is a statutory limit that was put in place to protect voters from having their cities issue debt that would be difficult to pay in later years. Another protection is there's an annual primary tax limit that cities can increase. So you have two portions of your property tax in Arizona. You have a primary property tax and you have a secondary property tax. The primary property tax is used for operations, police, fire, libraries, parks, and the like. And those primary tax increases, we can only levy 2% more on existing property from one year to the next. The city has a more stringent limit that the city council approved over 5 years ago. And that is, we have placed a limit on the total property tax increase on existing properties. The total property tax that we levy on existing properties at the city of Tempe can only increase by the consumer price index or inflation every year. So that's an additional limit that we have placed on our ability to levy taxes on properties. So the biggest protection that the voters have is what you're seeing tonight. We show you the types of projects that we intend to fund with the bonds, and the voters must authorize those bonds in order for us to collect the secondary property tax in order to repay the bonds. So this is the best protection that taxpayers have, which is to look at the projects, and you can see in the city of Tempe, most of our projects are maintaining existing assets, roads and sewer systems and parks and the like. But if there were a project in there that was a huge new addition to the city that you really weren't in favor of, then you would say, I don't want to pay secondary property taxes for that. I am going to vote no on those bonds. So that's the protection that the voters have to control their taxes as well. And I'll turn it back over to Mark.
This is a graphical representation of the tax bill for an owner-occupied home in Tempe. As you can see, the city is not the only jurisdiction that utilizes property tax to fund programs, services, and capital projects. So as you can see, about 50% of your property tax bill is earmarked for school districts. The city's share is approximately 21%, with the remainder for county and special districts, as well as the community college district. So the actual percentage on your bill may vary slightly depending on which school district that your home is located in. Next, we'll review some important upcoming dates. So on September 23rd, we'll be mailing the special bond election pamphlet, informational pamphlet. This pamphlet contains detailed information about the special bond election, a sample ballot, as well as voting information. On October 7th, early ballots are mailed. In-person voting is from October 7th through November 3rd. And then November 3rd is a special bond election. And just keep in mind that the special bond election is part of the national and state election on the same day. And then you can see the representation here of the publicity pamphlet sample ballot on the bond election that will be mailed out, as I stated, later this week. And as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, if you want information about the capital projects and descriptions, we've given you the web address there, tempe.gov/budget. If you want some more information about the election, the web address is tempe.gov/election. And then you can see the contact information for Ken Jones and myself if you want to phone or email us. So that concludes our presentation. At this time, we'll see if we have any questions.
Mark, this is Ken, and before you get the questions, I would just encourage people to take advantage of the tempe.gov/budget website, because although the projects are combined for purposes of the voting pamphlet so that you can see in general what the projects are, if you ever have any questions about the specific projects, Mark's budget team has gone to great lengths to create an interactive site there where you can click on each one and get a detailed description of each project that's planned to be funded with these bonds. So I would encourage you to go there and look at those if you have any questions about the projects themselves. Thank you.
So we have received no questions. So as I mentioned, if you have questions or you think of a question after the presentation, we provided you with email addresses there and phone numbers. And a recording of this presentation will also be available at the tempe.gov/budget.
Mark, some people may have joined after you gave the instructions for how to write a question. Can you go over that one more time?
Sure. So if you're at home and you do have a question, you'll see a little question icon on your screen. So it's purple, looks like a little book, maybe with a little question mark in it. If you click on that, you can type in your question and then hit submit, and then we can view the question.
Okay, Mark, it looks like we aren't going to get any written questions tonight, and thank you for leaving that screen up so that people can see both yours and my phone number and email addresses, so that if they have questions after the meeting, they can contact us.
Yep. Oh, wait, we may have one question. The question is, what opposition do you expect?
This is Ken Jones, Deputy City Manager. I don't know that we expect opposition. Our bonds have enjoyed favorable treatment in the past. We've never had a bond election get disapproved, and I think it's because we provide a lot of detail about the projects that are going to be funded. So we don't expect opposition. It's possible that folks wouldn't approve one or more of the questions because they're not that interested in those improvements. So we don't anticipate any opposition, and we just await the results of the election to see whether the electorate approves of the projects that are being proposed.
Ken, I don't see any new questions.
Okay. All right. I guess you can wrap it up, Mark.
All right. Well, that concludes our community forum on the special bond election. If you have any more Questions, as we stated, there's our email addresses as well as our phone numbers, and we would encourage you to go out to tempe.gov/budget for additional information about our capital improvement program and the city's budget. Thank you and have a good evening.